Eli Kingston walked into Westridge High's cafeteria, his shoulders squared despite the weight of being the only black student in the senior class. The cacophony of lunchtime chatter dimmed momentarily as curious eyes tracked his movement. 3 varsity wrestlers at the center table locked eyes on him, smirking as they nudged each other. Eli pretended not to notice, finding an empty table in the corner where he could eat his lunch in peace. Or so he hoped. Before I go on, I would really appreciate it if you give this video a like, click the subscribe button down below. It would really encourage me to create more videos for you. Thank you so much. Alright, let's continue. Hey new kid. The voice belonged to Tyler Reed, wrestling team captain with 2 state championships under his belt. He approached with 2 teammates flanking him like sentries. This table's reserved. Team tradition. A lie, obvious from the amused glances exchanged between Tyler's friends. Several nearby students watched with uncomfortable expressions, but no one intervened. Eli gathered his tray without argument. No problem. He spoke softly, eyes downcast, moving to leave. Tyler's foot extended at the last second, not enough to make him fall, but sufficient to make him stumble. Laughter rippled through their corner of the cafeteria as Eli regained his balance and walked away, his expression carefully neutral despite the heat rising in his chest. Later that afternoon, Eli stood at his locker, methodically organizing his textbooks when he overheard Tyler's voice around the corner. Did you see him just take it? Bet he won't last a week here. Eli's fingers tightened around his physics book, knuckles whitening before he consciously relaxed them, a practiced response. 3 years of competitive martial arts had taught him that control began with breathing. He inhaled deeply through his nose, exhaled through his mouth, and continued arranging his locker as if he hadn't heard a thing. When Eli finally arrived home, the 2-bedroom apartment felt hollow without his mother's presence. Her new job at the hospital meant night shifts 3 times a week, better pay but longer hours. He unwrapped his hand wraps and hung his worn GI in the makeshift dojo he'd created in their small spare room. Trophies and medals from regional and national competitions lined a single shelf, hidden here rather than displayed, his mother's requirement after what happened at his last tournament. The memory surfaced unbidden, his opponent's whispered slur before the match, the red haze that descended during their fight, and finally, the boy's arm twisted at an angle nature never intended. The horrified silence that followed. His coach's hand on his shoulder, not in celebration but restraint. His mother's eyes, not filled with pride but fear. Fear of what her son could do. Fear of a world that would never see his actions as self-defense. Eli moved through his training routine with mechanical precision. Kata, strikes against the heavy bag, balance exercises on one leg. Each movement executed with flawless technique built from thousands of repetitions. The discipline brought his mind back to center, away from the memories, away from Tyler's taunts. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Dinner in fridge. Love you. Be home by midnight. He responded with a heart emoji, knowing she worried constantly since their move. The next morning, Tyler and his friends escalated from words to actions. Eli found himself shouldered against lockers between classes, heard exaggerated whispers about affirmative action admissions, and discovered his gym clothes mysteriously soaked in the shower after PE. Each time, he maintained his facade of timid resignation, never revealing the calculations running behind his eyes. How easily he could reverse Tyler's holds, the precise point to strike that would drop him instantly, the leverage that would turn the bully's strength against him. When Friday arrived, Tyler cornered Eli in the empty locker room after everyone had left. You know what? You're making this too easy. He shoved Eli hard into the metal lockers, the clang echoing in the tiled room. At least give me something to work with here. Tyler's friends laughed, one of them leaning against the door to prevent escape. For a dangerous moment, Eli's body responded before his mind could intervene, weight shifting to the balls of his feet, muscles coiling like springs, breathing pattern changing from passive to primed. His hand twitched toward a block and strike combination that would have left Tyler on the floor gasping. But the image of his mother's face flashed before him, her voice echoing, "Promise me, Elijah. No fighting. We can't afford another incident." With tremendous effort, Eli forced his shoulders to slump, his eyes to drop. "Just leave me alone, man." He sidestepped rather than confronted, walking away with measured steps that disguised how badly his body wanted to explode into action. Behind him, Tyler called out taunts that faded as Eli rounded the corner, his self-control intact but fraying at the edges like an overused rope holding too heavy a weight. "Fight back, you coward." Tyler's words echoed through the hallway as he knocked Eli's books from his hands. The impact scattered papers across the floor, but what caught Eli's attention wasn't the mess. It was the phone pointed at him from Tyler's friend's hand, recording everything. Their laughter had a new edge to it. This wasn't just about hallway dominance anymore. They wanted digital evidence of his humiliation. Sophia Chun, debate team captain and honor student, witnessed the scene from her locker nearby. Unlike others who quickly averted their eyes, she approached as Tyler and his friends sauntered away. "They're absolute jerks," she said, kneeling to help gather Eli's scattered calculus homework. "You should report them." Eli thanked her, but shook his head slightly. His experience with authority figures had taught him that reporting often made things worse, especially when you were the only black face in a sea of white ones. That evening, as Eli executed perfect roundhouse kicks against his punching bag, sweat dripping from his brow, his mother appeared in the doorway of his practice room. "Your principal called today," she said, arms crossed. "Something about you having trouble adjusting?" Eli continued his routine without breaking form, careful to keep his voice neutral as he explained the situation was nothing serious. But his mother, a nurse who could read vital signs in her sleep, wasn't fooled. "Eli Kingston, I know when you're holding back. Just like I know your middle knuckles are bruised, not from hitting someone but from hitting that bag too hard." The next day, a video circulated showing Eli stumbling as Tyler shoved him, captioned with, "New kid needs walking lessons." Sophia showed it to him during lunch, her expression tight with anger on his behalf. "This has to stop," she insisted. "My cousin works for the school board. This qualifies as harassment." Eli stirred his cafeteria pasta without appetite, explaining in measured tones that he'd handled worse. What he didn't tell her was how each night, he practiced more intensely, his body remembering the tournament where he'd snapped, the one where racial slurs had pushed him past control, resulting in an opponent with a broken arm and his own disqualification despite his clear victory. When Eli was called to the vice principal's office the following period, he found himself seated across from a man who looked more annoyed than concerned. "Kingston, I understand there's been some friction between you and some of our athletes." The conversation that followed was filled with phrases like adjusting period, and boys will be boys, and need to toughen up a bit. When Eli mentioned the video, the vice principal suggested he try not to give them material to work with. Eli left the office with confirmation of what he already knew. He was on his own. Sophia caught up with him after school, insisting on walking together since they lived in the same direction. "You're not what I expected," she admitted as they passed the football field. When Eli raised an eyebrow, she continued, "You move like, I don't know, like someone who knows how to handle themselves. But you don't." Before Eli could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother, another night shift. Another evening alone with his thoughts and his training. The ambush came the following Monday. Eli was crossing the parking lot after staying late to finish a lab report when Tyler's truck crawled alongside him, windows down, 3 grinning faces inside. "Hey, charity case. We're bored. Thought you might entertain us." The truck stopped, and Tyler emerged with his 2 friends, forming a loose circle around Eli. There was no audience this time, no phones recording, just 3 wrestlers looking for entertainment at his expense. "Look, I don't want trouble," Eli said, adjusting his backpack strap, already calculating escape routes, knowing he could outrun them if necessary. But Tyler stepped closer, invading his personal space. "That's your problem," he sneered. "No spine. But you've never even been in a real fight." The irony almost made Eli laugh, almost. He'd competed in arenas across the country, trained with Olympic hopefuls, could execute combinations these high school wrestlers couldn't even name. Tyler's first shove was expected. The second made Eli step back. But when Tyler threw an actual punch, something instinctive and long practice took over. Eli's hand moved with precision honed by thousands of repetitions, catching Tyler's wrist mid-swing and redirecting the force harmlessly past his ear. He didn't counterattack, didn't take Tyler to the ground as he easily could have. He simply neutralized the threat with such effortless technique that all 4 boys froze in sudden stunned silence. "That's not possible," Tyler whispered, staring at his own arm still held in Eli's precise grip. Eli released him immediately, stepping back, his carefully constructed facade cracking visibly as he realized what he'd done. Tyler's friends exchanged looks of confusion, while Tyler himself rubbed his wrist, his expression transforming from shock to suspicious interest. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, but Eli was already walking away, his heart pounding not from fear but from the recognition that his cover was blown. A video circulated showing Eli's perfect defensive move against Tyler, capturing the fluid motion and controlled power that could only come from years of training. "Did you see how fast he moved?" whispered students as Eli walked through hallways now filled with curious stares rather than dismissive glances. The 10-second clip, taken by one of Tyler's friends, had transformed Eli overnight from invisible new kid to mysterious figure of interest. Sophia cornered him before first period, eyes bright with discovery. "You're Elijah Kingston," she said, emphasizing his name as if it held new meaning. Three-time junior national champion in mixed martial arts. Gold medalist at the Pan American Youth Games. She turned her phone toward him, showing a tournament highlight reel from 2 years earlier, Eli executing a flawless spinning back kick that had secured his national title. "Why didn't you say anything?" Eli guided her to a quiet corner of the hallway, away from curious ears. "That part of my life is over," he explained, voice low. "Last tournament, I lost control. Broke a guy's arm after he stopped, the memory still raw. After he said some things. My mom made me promise to walk away from competition. New school, fresh start." Sophia studied his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, then nodded slowly. "Your secret's safe with me," she promised. "But Tyler's on a warpath. He's telling everyone you blindsided him." During lunch, the wrestling coach, Mr. Harmon, approached Eli's table. "Kingston, got a minute?" The broad-shouldered former collegiate wrestler didn't wait for an answer before sitting down. "That was some technique you showed yesterday. Self-taught." The question was casual but probing. Eli shook his head, explaining he'd trained at his uncle's dojo since he was 5, a half-truth that omitted his competition record. Coach Harmon nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Our team could use someone with your reflexes. Think about it." He slid a practice schedule across the table before leaving. Eli pocketed it without commitment, knowing his mother would never approve. When Eli got home, he found his mother waiting, her night shift apparently canceled. "Your principal called again," she said without preamble. "Something about a fight?" Eli explained what happened, emphasizing that he'd only defended himself, hadn't hurt anyone. His mother's expression softened with understanding, but remained firm. "We moved here for a fresh start, Elijah. After what happened with that boy from Atlanta." She didn't need to finish. They both remembered the racial slurs, Eli's explosion of rage, the sickening crack of bone, the lawsuits that followed. Only his previously spotless record and witness accounts of provocation had kept him from serious consequences. Tyler's response came the next day, a direct confrontation in the crowded cafeteria. "Lucky move yesterday, Kingston," he announced loudly enough to draw attention. "But luck runs out. School fair is next Friday. You and me on the mat." It wasn't a question or even a challenge. It was a demand backed by the implicit threat that refusal would only escalate Tyler's harassment campaign. Students around them fell silent, sensing the tension crackling between the two. Eli remained seated, maintaining an outward calm that belied his internal conflict. Fighting would break his promise. Refusing would make his remaining months at Westridge unbearable. Sophia spoke up from beside Eli, her voice carrying clearly. "Sounds like you're challenging him to an official match, Tyler. That would require school supervision, proper equipment, medical staff on standby, all the regulations that protect athletes." The debate champion's strategic intervention shifted the dynamic instantly. Tyler hesitated, thrown off by the formality she introduced. "Unless," she continued smoothly, "this is just another attempt at hallway intimidation?" The wrestling coach appeared as if summoned by the confrontation. "I couldn't help overhearing," Mr. Harmon said, arms crossed over his broad chest. "Kingston Reed, if you want to test skills, do it properly. Exhibition match at the fair, sanctioned and supervised. 3 2-minute rounds, standard rules." The coach's solution transformed Tyler's ambush into something legitimate, something Eli couldn't easily dismiss without appearing afraid. Tyler grinned, clearly believing his wrestling pedigree would prevail in an official setting. "Done," he agreed, extending a hand in mock sportsmanship. Eli found himself at a crossroads, his mother's words echoing in his mind against the reality of his situation. With deliberate slowness, he stood and accepted Tyler's handshake, feeling the other boy trying to crush his fingers. "Standard rules," Eli agreed, his voice steady. What Tyler didn't understand was that standard rules were what Eli knew best, rules that would prevent exactly the kind of dirty tactics Tyler and his friends employed in hallways and parking lots. Rules that would give Eli permission to demonstrate his skill without breaking his promise to avoid fighting. As the news spread through school, Eli called his mother during lunch break. "Mom, I need to tell you something," he began, finding it suddenly difficult to explain that he had agreed to step onto a mat again, to publicly become the person they had left behind in their old life. The long silence after he finished speaking weighed heavily, until she finally sighed. "Elijah, we can't keep running from who you are." Her voice softened. "Just promise me one thing, win with grace, not anger." For the first time since arriving at Westridge, Eli felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he walked to his next class, no longer hiding but preparing. The gymnasium fell silent as Eli removed his hoodie, revealing a physique sculpted by years of disciplined training. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Tyler's confident smile faltered for the first time. The wrestling mats had been placed center court, surrounded by folding chairs and bleachers filled with students eager to witness the showdown that had dominated school gossip all week. Eli spotted his mother in the third row, her expression a mixture of concern and pride as she nodded encouragingly. Coach Harmon stood between the two competitors, explaining the rules to the crowd. Standard folk-style wrestling rules apply. 3 two-minute rounds. Points awarded for takedowns, escapes, and control. Victory by pin or points. He turned to both boys. "Clean match, gentlemen. Shake hands and return to your corners." Tyler's grip was crushing, his eyes narrow with determination. "You're going down, Kingston," he muttered through clenched teeth. Eli simply nodded, centered and calm, retreating to where Sophia waited with a water bottle and towel. "He's all aggression, no technique," she whispered, having spent the week researching wrestling strategies to help Eli prepare. "Don't let him bait you into making mistakes." Eli appreciated her support, but knew she didn't fully understand what was about to happen. Tyler was indeed aggressive, but he was also a 2-time state champion with legitimate skill. What Eli possessed was something entirely different. Combat awareness honed through thousands of hours across multiple disciplines, not just wrestling. The whistle blew. Tyler charged forward immediately, attempting a single-leg takedown that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Eli shifted his weight subtly, redirecting Tyler's momentum while appearing to struggle. He allowed Tyler to secure a partial takedown, giving him 2 points and feeding his confidence. The crowd cheered for their wrestling star, unaware that Eli was measuring Tyler's strength, speed, and patterns, gathering data like a computer processing information. The first round ended with Tyler ahead on points, grinning at his supporters as he returned to his corner. "That all you got?" he taunted across the mat. Coach Harmon gave Eli a curious look, recognizing the controlled defense that didn't match the video he'd seen of Eli's reflexes. "You're holding back," he observed quietly. Eli took a sip of water. "Just getting started, coach." He glanced at his mother, who raised an eyebrow in silent communication. She knew exactly what he was doing. The second round transformed the match. When Tyler charged again, Eli was ready. He executed a perfect sprawl, denying Tyler's takedown attempt before transitioning smoothly to gain control. The crowd gasped as Eli effortlessly reversed positions, his movements fluid and precise where Tyler's were now becoming frustrated and sloppy. Points accumulated as Eli demonstrated textbook technique, neither showboating nor humiliating his opponent, simply demonstrating mastery. Tyler's frustration mounted as the third round began with scores now heavily favoring Eli. Desperate, he attempted a move that bent the rules, a small joint manipulation that would likely go unnoticed by officials, but could cause significant pain. Eli not only anticipated the move, but countered with a lightning-fast switch that left Tyler completely exposed. The gymnasium erupted as Eli secured a legitimate pin, the referee slapping the mat to signal the end of the match. For a moment, Tyler lay on his back, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. When he finally stood, his face flushed with humiliation rather than exertion, he seemed poised to storm off. Instead, to everyone's surprise, Eli extended his hand. "Good match," he said, loud enough for nearby spectators to hear. "You've got solid fundamentals." The compliment was genuine. Tyler was indeed talented, just outclassed by someone with far more extensive training. After a moment's hesitation, Tyler took the offered hand. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked, his anger giving way to reluctant respect. Eli shrugged. "My uncle's dojo. Been training since I was 5. He deliberately omitted his championship titles, offering Tyler a way to save face. "There's a difference between being strong and being a bully," Eli added quietly, meant for Tyler's ears alone. "You don't need one to be the other." Coach Harmon approached, clapping both boys on the shoulder. "Impressive work, gentlemen." He turned to Eli. Kingston, my office Monday morning. We need to talk about your future with the team. As students surrounded them, Eli caught his mother's eye across the gym. She was wiping away tears but smiling broadly, and he knew she understood what she had witnessed. Not just a victory, but a reclamation of self. For the first time since arriving at Westridge, Eli stood tall, no longer hiding his strength, but channeling it with purpose and control. Would you consider teaching us some of those moves? Asked the wrestling captain as he approached Eli's lunch table, the same table where Eli had sat alone on his first day. 3 weeks had passed since the match, and Westridge High's social landscape had shifted like tectonic plates after an earthquake. Eli glanced up from his conversation with Sophia to find not just the captain but 2 other wrestlers waiting expectantly, genuine respect in their expressions. Coach Harmon already has me helping with defensive techniques on Tuesdays, Eli replied, but his tone was friendly rather than dismissive. The captain nodded earnestly. Yeah, but we were hoping for some extra sessions. Regional championships are coming up, and that reversal you showed Jenkins yesterday was game-changing. Eli smiled, considering the request. I'll check my schedule, he promised, exchanging phone numbers before the wrestlers departed with satisfied nods. Sophia watched the interaction with amused pride. From social outcast to sensei in 3 weeks flat, she observed, stealing one of his fries. Pretty impressive transformation. Eli shrugged, still adjusting to his new status. His mother had been right, they couldn't outrun who he was, and embracing his identity had ironically made Westridge feel more like home than hiding ever could. Speaking of transformations, he said, nodding across the cafeteria where Tyler sat with his usual group, subdued but no longer harassing underclassmen. Before I go on, I would really appreciate it if you give this video a like, click the subscribe button down below. It would really encourage me to create more videos for you. Thank you so much. Alright, let's continue. The aftermath of the match had brought unexpected consequences. Videos of Eli's technique had gone viral within the school, leading to the discovery of his competitive background. Rather than causing problems, it had earned him respect and accountability for Tyler, whose bullying was now under scrutiny from both students and administrators. The vice principal who had dismissed Eli's concerns now found himself defending his inaction to the superintendent after multiple students came forward with similar experiences. That evening, as Eli demonstrated a wrist lock to his mother in their living room, her phone rang. Mrs. Kingston? This is Coach Simmons from Riverside College. Eli froze, recognizing the name of the renowned coach who had recruited him before the incident that ended his competitive career. I saw some recent footage of your son. I understand why you both stepped away from competition, but I'd like to discuss a potential scholarship opportunity. His mother's eyes met Eli's, silently asking what he wanted. Eli nodded slowly, ready to reconsider the path he'd abandoned. The following Monday, Eli arrived at practice to find Tyler already warming up on the mats. Their relationship remained complicated, not friendship, but a wary respect born of their confrontation. Kingston, Tyler acknowledged with a nod. Coach wants us to demonstrate counters together for the freshmen. The request was significant. Pairing them meant Harmon trusted their ability to work professionally despite their history. Eli nodded, dropping his bag and joining Tyler at the center of the mat. As weeks passed, Eli's self-defense club grew from a handful of interested students to a proper class held twice weekly in the gym. Sophia handled the administrative side, organizing schedules and convincing the principal to make it an official school activity. It's not just about physical techniques, Eli explained to new members. It's about awareness, confidence, and knowing when not to fight. The irony wasn't lost on him. The skills he'd once hidden now openly shared, transforming from a source of shame to community contribution. The district championships arrived with Westridge entering as underdogs despite their improved team. Eli, now an assistant coach rather than competitor, stood with Coach Harmon as they watched their wrestlers warm up. Across the gymnasium, athletes from Lakeside high-eyed their team with contempt, one of them making a comment just loud enough to be heard. Since when does Westridge let? The slur that followed hung in the air like poison. Eli felt Tyler stiffen beside him, saw the anger flash across his face. Before either could react, Coach Harmon stepped between them and the Lakeside team. We win with skill, not words, he said firmly. Channel it into your performance. Eli met Tyler's eyes, recognizing the protective fury there, not for himself, but on Eli's behalf. It was perhaps the most surprising transformation of all. Tyler Reed, once the instigator of racial harassment, now bristling at its appearance from others. The Westridge team gathered in a circle before their first matches, Eli and Coach Harmon at the center. "Remember what we've practiced," Eli said, meeting each teammate's eyes. "Strength isn't about domination. It's about control, respect, and lifting each other up." As they broke with a team chant, Eli caught sight of his mother in the stands, sitting beside Sophia, both women beaming with pride. His journey at Westridge had come full circle, from hiding his strength to sharing it, from isolation to community, from shame to purpose. As he took his place on the sidelines, clipboard in hand, Eli Kingston stood tall, his hidden strength now a beacon for others to follow.